Hi, everyone. I've been asked a question about design in the universe and what do I think is the strongest indication that the universe is designed. So I'm taking that as a kind of a deistic question about God rather than about any particular arguments with particular religious beliefs. So I do have an illustration that I'm going to answer it with, and I've used it in my book, The Genius of the Invisible God. It's about the mathematics and the physics and the number of combinations of possibilities in states. So it's rather like a mathematical puzzle. And I'm going to use the illustration of a lock, the combination lock. So the kind of combinations of possibilities we're talking about is what a term that's called combinatorial explosion, which is basically that there's an exponential increase in possibilities as the number of variables increases. And that's true of pretty much all systems of that nature. And the universe happens to be the biggest system of that we know. So I want you to imagine a lock on a briefcase with three dials and 9 digits on each dial. You've seen them before, I'm sure. So imagine if you were trying to pick that lock and find the right combination of numbers. If you could turn the dials at one dial per second, that's if you exclude three zeros, then that's 999 combinations, and it would take you approximately 15 minutes to get through all of those combinations. So the most it would be 15 minutes to exhaust all the permutations of that three dial briefcase. So if we now imagine a bigger set of dials, let's imagine we have 7 dials to solve. We have to pick the lock of 7, again, 0 to 9. If we were to exhaust all of those possibilities at a rate of 1 per second, the most it could take us would be around 4 months. So it would take about 4 months to go through every combination, and one of those combinations would be the right one to open the lock. So picture that in your mind for a second, and now think about the mathematical possibilities in the entire universe. And imagine we added a few more dials to a combination lock. Let's say we had 18 dials. 18, I believe, was the example I used in the book. Again, a tiny proportion of combinations compared with the whole universe. But imagine if we did have 18 dials and we could solve the mathematical puzzle by turning one dial per second. How long do you think it would take us then to exhaust the permutations? Well, believe it or not, with 18 dials, one a second, it would take a staggering 317 billion years to go through the amount of combinations on that set of dials. 317 billion years. That in itself is over 20 times larger than the history, longer than the history of the universe. So if it would take 317 billion years to go through every combinatorial sequence on that lock, imagine taking the number of combinations. I think it's 10 over the power of 19. That's 1 with 19 zeros. Imagine those as particles in a glass of water, just one glass of water, where instead of on individual dials, every single particle could be in any position in the glass of water. The computation for that would go right off the charts. And even that is minuscule compared with the kind of things we're talking about here with the universe. So imagine the universe as our great big complex combination lock, and imagine it's a mathematical puzzle. Even just elementary particles in the universe, there's thought to be somewhere in the region of 10 to the power of 20 of 83. That's a 1 with 83 zeros. So we can state that if it takes 317 billion years to go through a lock with just 18 dials, the time spent working out all the mathematical permutations needed to produce the right kind of conditions in the universe is absolutely off the charts. It's staggering. So you could recruit volunteers for the rest of your life, and you could set them the task of trying to arrive at the right combination for your 18 dial combination, and feels pretty certain that no one would do so. Now imagine if one day a man came along and started to turn the dials quickly, and within about 20 seconds arrived at exactly the right combination, the combination that's supposed to take 317 billion years. You'd be more than justified in believing that that man had prior knowledge of the right combination of dials. In fact, it'd be absurd to think otherwise. So similarly, with the possible configurations of digits, that's information in our universe, so configuration of particles, there's a combination lock of such astronomical proportions with so many permutations, we can't even comprehend the magnitude of the number. Whereby, without a kind of if you like, a divine lock picker, there would be no chance of arriving at that kind of order needed for stars and eventually planets and life within the age of the universe's lifetime. It took about two to 300 million years before the first star came along, and so you have a time axis, and you have a kind of combinatorial explosion axis, whereby you're measuring the length of time it would take for all of those permutations to yield anything like the kind of order that would be required to produce something like the first stars. And arriving at the right combination, going back to our locksmith, our first locksmith, arriving at the right combination in 20 seconds within 317 billion years for our 18 digits, that is much less of a big ask than arriving at something as ordered as stars within a mere few 100 million years after the Big Bang. In fact, arriving at the kind of order we see in the universe, given the staggering permutations at the beginning of possibilities, and that's including the fact that actually once you have clusters of particles, it then becomes, because of the way gravity works, it becomes more likely that particles will cluster with the ratchet effect even further onto the system. So even with that in mind, the time it would take, given the degrees of randomness that would be at play in a universe that was expanding in the way that's expanding, 14 billion years isn't even close to being long enough to expect to see the kind of order. So what that tells you is that a divine agent has constrained the possibilities to the extent that order of that kind was being enabled to be created. And that is not just the best argument for design. It's like God has shown us that he is the divine lockpicker. He's given us something of staggering permutational proportions, and he's constrained within the mathematical engine that governs the laws of physics. He's constrained the possibilities in a way that makes it clear and evident that the universe is intelligently designed. And almost nobody seems to get this. There are many complex reasons why, but if you just look at the permutations and you look at the combinatorial explosion that we're talking about, given the initial conditions and the relatively small time frame, 14 billion years sounds like a lot of time, but it's nothing compared with the time it would take in a purely random fashion for the kind of order to come about through purely mathematical numbers alone. It's staggering, and that is your best evidence that the universe is designed. Thank you for listening.